Hello, hello. Welcome to the Mother Daze podcast. I'm Teresa Palmer.
And I am Sarah Wright Olsen. And I just peeked around behind me because I was like, our friend Angie, who we had on the podcast, Angie Fletcher, she sent me a bunch of underwear and it's all right there on my...
I was just thinking that this morning. I put my mamoosh on and I was like,
oh yeah,
I wonder if she got some
on too. Yeah.
I was wearing my mamoosh underwear last night and yesterday at work because I was like, it was the G-string. It was really lacy, but it's see-through.
Yeah.
And I, luckily I had done my little chink, chink, chink and gotten rid of, I was looking really good down there. Anyway, I went to work and the workday just kept getting longer and longer. Like I went in for a fitting.
Yeah.
And then the fitting was done and I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to get home to my kids like quite early. It's only like an hour and 15-minute drive from my house, right, where I'm shooting.
Yeah.
And then I went to hair and makeup and that kept stretching out sort of longer and longer. And then so I went from costume into hair and makeup. And hair and makeup, I was like, I had estimated when I'd be out of there to drive home to see the kids. Plus then there's an hour time difference. So I get home an hour later because I'm driving every day from New South Wales, the state of New South Wales, into the state of Queensland to get to work. But it's only an hour and a half.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I will like probably be home around 8-ish. And then hair and makeup was like taking a little bit longer. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I was like trying to really go through the two very specific looks in the movie because we're in pre-production right now.
Yeah.
And then I was like, cool, I think I'm done. We took the photos and I was like, ready to go.
I'm good.
And then the second AD was like, dialect session. And I was like, I'm married to an American, but okay, I'll just do a little quick like pop in and say hi. So then dialect session and then the dialect woman who was amazing was like, mama, and doing all the like exercises and all the things like badaga. I was like,
oh my God, I thought I was going to go home and I'm like sitting here going habada,
like doing all these exercises. And then I was in this boardroom and then the accounting people in the background were like, we can't work. Can you go somewhere else? And I was like, oh my God, I've been put here. I'm so sorry. Like, I don't even want to be doing this either. So then I get moved to yet another room. And while I'm in there, costume pops ahead and they're like, can we have you for another like 30 minutes at the end of this? And I was like, what? And I was like, okay. So then I'm like trying to wrap up this dialect coach, but it's going for over an hour. And I was like, I think I'm good. Yep, feel really good about that. Why don't we do another session like another day? And she was like, why don't you talk to me in the American accent as though you're yourself? And I was like, I'm okay. So I was like, I'm Teresa Palmer and I have 4 kids and I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I just want to go home. So then I wrap that up, start doing my fitting, and instead of it just being one extra thing they forgot about, it was like the bra, because I got my wrong bra size. So then it was the bras and it was the sexy time outfit and then it was the blah, blah, blah. And then as I'm like, okay, finally, Mark, think I'm coming home. The second AD pops in again. This is at like 7 p.m. And he's like, do you want to just come back tomorrow because makeup realized that they forgot to tan you? And I was like, you want me to pop in tomorrow? So it is an hour and a half drive to get in just for the tan. And I was like, no, we'll just do that now. That's okay. So then I go into hair and makeup at like, now I'm like 7:15. I go into hair and makeup, totally unprepared for a tan. And I'm wearing my see-through mamoosh underwear, G-string. And I was like, you know what? I've had 4 babies. Let's just go. Tits out, boom, doing it. It's so, and look at my patchy face. I look like I have melasma again on my face. It's so funny. I'm like, oh, I remember that. I remember these days of melasma, like the patchy melasma.
So you're showing me, I am seeing like some darker spots. Like, how do they fix that? What do they do?
Well, I did point it out as we were leaving. I was like, oh, will this dry like that? And she was like, no, it doesn't dry like that. And I was like, oh, okay, don't worry about it. Yeah. Wake up and I'm like, I really look like I have melasma. Like, if you're watching YouTube, I'm like scarred. I'm going to have to cover that up.
Teresa, can you please send a picture to the makeup lady and said, so do you remember how you told me that it didn't dry like that? It's dry. It's dry.
I was sort of trying to wipe it off on my way home.
Wait, it's so funny because I thought it was a shadow until you said something. No. And then I was like, you're so tan. And also shadowed tan. Right here.
I'm so tan.
And you look so blonde.
Tan.
They
made me so
blonde.
So blonde. It's such a vibe. But do you know what's really cute for my characters? So I have two different versions of myself. I have my character's name is Sunny. So I have Zen Sunny, who's like, she's really into like personal development work. And she does her tarot and whatever. And then I have like Indie Club Sunny, where I'm like really like full Kardashian makeup, like boom. And Zen Sunny, fun. I got to send you this photo. I get to have all these freckles on my face. Like full.
Are you
like,
two different people?
No, but for the club, the idea is that I cover my freckles.
Oh, so you have freckles. Yes. Oh, that's
so
really
I have
cute.
Like fake freckles all over my face.
Well, I know a lot of people who do fake freckles, the tattoo freckles, and they look really cool.
Really good.
They look really cool.
We have a friend who has it and it looks really cute.
But now I see people all the time with these like really, really cute freckles. And I'm like
perfect freckles.
Those aren't real. I know your secret now.
They aren't real. Yeah, I was walking out to my car and I was in this robe and I was like, whatever. I was naked underneath. I was like, I don't care who I see. Walking out, and then the director's like, Teresa. I'm like, oh, hi. Oh my God. Hi. He's like, you've been here all day. And I was like, I know.
Yeah, I know.
And then he was like, oh my God, the freckles. Your freckles. That's a real woman. Look at you now with just your bare face and your, where I can't even see the freckles. And I was like, that's because, well, I wasn't meant to tell you this, but those freckles aren't real. And he was like, what? And so he thought that was my real face, was the freckles, because he kept looking at me. He was like, I can't even really see them. I was like, yes,
he said, wait a minute. He said,
that's the face of a real woman.
What does that mean?
Freckles, I don't know. And then he was like, that's what a real, like he loved the freckles, but he thought they were my real freckles.
It's really funny.
So then when he saw me in my robe and I've just been tanned, he's obviously expecting to see a face full of freckles.
And he's like, where are your freckles?
And he was
really confused.
And I was like, oh my God, I wasn't meant to tell you. We were meant to just pretend they were my freckles because we thought that you'd be like, no, I don't want that. But I had to tell him. So I had to message the makeup artist last night and be like, I'm so sorry.
Oops.
He saw me without like any makeup on and he was like, where are the freckles? Anyway.
That's really funny. I think that's going to be really cute. I can't wait to see that.
It's so cute.
You have to send us a picture, like post a picture with all your freckles on.
That used to be in my prayers at nighttime. I wanted curly hair and freckles and also to go in the ambulance and go to hospital. But I did. That was one of my main asks was freckles. It didn't happen, unfortunately.
Okay, this is going to sound dark, but by the way, when I tan, I do get freckles on my nose, and so I always really like those. I love it. Loves it. Anyway, but this is going to sound dark, but when I was a kid, I used to worry about house fires. And
Sarah.
I know.
Like
I was just thinking about this the other day. I maybe because there's so many fires in California in general. Like I have thought about many times, like, gosh, it would be so devastating, like losing your home, and like it'd be so scary. And like the one thing I would pray about would be like, please don't ever let it happen in the middle of the night. You know, like it would be so terrifying to happen in the middle of the night. And it didn't. Thank God. It happened in the middle of the night. Like we were able to get out, and it was the daytime, and then like everything is about 50,000 times scarier, I think, when it happens at nighttime, because you just feel like,
especially if you're getting warnings at nighttime, some people are asleep.
Well, a lot of times it's like, you know, firemen banging on your door. And so imagine like firemen banging on your door, policemen like waking you up, like, you know. Anyway, so I was just thinking that I used to worry about that too. And then it ended up happening, which is so crazy.
I wonder if it was like you were mentally preparing yourself
I don't know.
for the experience of, do you know, that
Let's hope
funny.
not, because I've also worried about many other things that I hope
so
are never going to
happen. So have I. We don't even have to say what they are.
Nah, not going to put that in the universe.
But I remember when I was pregnant last year, I had 2 dreams that the baby died. I had 2 dreams. And I remember just ignoring them and being like, oh, that's just my anxiety.
Fear.
That's not real. But then afterwards, I was like, oh my God, was that me mentally preparing myself for the feeling of it? And maybe it was. Like, I just don't know. You know, because of what happened to you, I've been looking around our area and stuff and thinking about like things. And, you know, in 2022, there were these like this once in a lifetime experience here in the Northern Rivers where it all flooded. And I was thinking about like your experience and this whole area, like an entire area of Lismore and all these other nearby areas, like were completely underwater, like 16 meters high underwater, like people being washed away in cars and dying and awful, awful things, and old people like caught in their homes and drowning and just like horrendous stories. Yeah. And our kids go to school near that area. And so we're in the area every day. And I look around and I can see the damage of the floods, like all the way up to the top of these buildings. And I'm looking around, it's still not back to the way it was, this town. Like this is almost 3 years on. And I'm looking around and all these houses that got affected that are just abandoned now. And they've got these like big, I guess, government issued fences, these like silver fences around so many parts of the town. And it almost like it feels so like heartbreaking to see all these businesses that never recovered. And I was just looking around, and then I was like, I want to educate myself a little bit more since like this has become our neighborhood or a part of our lives. We live about like 30 minutes away from where it happened, but we're there every day. So I was like, I just want to educate myself. And like everywhere we go, where we drop off the kids and we go to get groceries, I was asking them there, they were like, oh, this whole thing was completely underwater. It was like up to the roofs. And then I started looking at the timeline, and the emergency evacuations were coming at midnight and like 1:10 a.m. the next one. And then the next one was like, everyone's got to get out. And then it was in the middle of the night. And I was looking through that. There's this really amazing thing on the ABC where you can scroll down and see play by play, like how this evacuation unfolded. And I think there were 3 like out of this world rain events. And when it rains here, I mean, it rains. Like it was raining like crazy, I'd say, the 3rd day we were here. And Forrest, being Forrest, he took one of our moving boxes out in the rain and like sat in the rain and was like shooting Nerf guns out of the box, like having the most amazing time in the rain. But then it started like thunder, like crazy. And then the rain was going sideways and upwards. And I was like, I've never seen rain like this before. I've never, like, this feels so hardcore, these storms like come in fast and furious. And then I ran out into the, because I thought Forrest, we got sort of a large property. I was like, Forrest is hiding in the rain, like having too much fun. And now it's thunder and lightning and it's cracking. And I was running around like a mad person, like, Forrest, in the rain. And then Mark's running after me. He's like, I found him. He's inside. And I was like, oh my God. And there was this huge clap of lightning, like right by our home. And I thought about these people who went through like these unbelievable storms. Like, it would have been so scary, but then to have the evacuations like throughout the night, I'm like, how many people were asleep? Like, how did that work? Like, how many people just didn't know until it was already up to their beds? And a lot of the stories are people woke up in the middle of the night and their beds were floating and they're in a room of water. Oh my gosh,
stop it.
You know, and people have pets, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so scary.
That's the thing, is that I don't know about you, but like I sleep with my phone completely off, like turned off, signal off. Like I don't have a phone like signal at all happening in my room at night. Plus I have an air purifier that like blasts and is super loud, makes noise. Yeah. I just don't know how I would hear anything. That's the thing.
I sleep with earplugs in.
Yeah. I don't know how I would like know that anything was happening. They'd have to break the door down and come inside and grab me. You know what I mean? Like
exactly. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like, and obviously, like that's when they got the alerts, and that's when they started.
That's really. I think that's what happened with the Woolsey fire too. Is like there was a trailer park in, I think it was Paradise, California, that was, you know, a few years back, and it all happened in the middle of the night. And then the one that happened in Santa Barbara happened in the middle of the night. The huge like mudslides after all the fires.
The mudslides, that's right. I remember.
And so many people died. So many.
It's so crazy to think about.
Yeah, those natural disasters
that are just getting like
devastating. It's beyond
and worse.
Yeah. So the thing that's so great, is that the wrong word? Probably. The thing that's like, you know, I guess a saving grace is that we were all awake and it was a day. And yeah.
I remember my first experience with like a natural disaster. It wasn't a direct experience. It was our friend's son died in the tsunami, in the Boxing Day tsunami. You know, that unbelievable one, which was like the earthquake under the ocean. Indonesia got affected, like Thailand, Malaysia.
Yes.
The one that just hit right in the middle of the ocean.
Yep.
And it just, it was, I think, over 200,000 people died. And he was there on his honeymoon. And so it was so I went to school with the brother of the boy that died. But my parents they were very good friends with this family. And Karen, my stepmom, she was a part of a walking group of 4 mothers in the neighborhood. And this young man's mother was one of the 4. And so he passed away in the tsunami, and we were hearing so many stories about it. It was a really big story in Australia because he played for an AFL club. And so they were talking a lot. He was on his honeymoon with his wife. Oh. He was carrying like camera equipment on his back. And anyway, he passed away. And then within the span of like a year and a half, of those 4 mothers, 3 of them lost children in a year and a half. Like teenage, between 18 and 25, 3 of them lost children. And it was like this crazy thing. And I remember thinking at the time, like, how awful to have, like, it's so unnatural to experience that, like losing a child. And I'm like,
yes,
of 4 like close friends, like 3, imagine being the 4th one as well. Can you imagine?
No. That would, I mean,
holding that grief, but then also being like, is this coming for me too? Like, I can't help but, like, I would be superstitious and think like, this is coming for me too. I mean, it was just such an awful experience, but I remember like watching all the videos of that because like I had that link, and I would spend hours and hours going through the most insane footage. And I don't know what it was, but I like could not stop watching it and sobbing, crying, and reading all the stories and just like,
I remember that. I mean, there was also like people who were holding onto a telephone pole for hours and hours and hours in the air.
Trees.
Like, trees, like it's haunting.
I remember as a kid, like I was always really into like ghost stories and aliens and like UFOs and stuff. I was really obsessed. But then at some point I started getting into like crazier things, like started thinking about natural disasters. And it was when all those movies, do you remember when all those movies came out sort of in the 2000s? It was like Dante's Peak and Volcano and Deep Impact and and I think it was Armageddon, like all these crazy, like these things are going to happen and the world's going to end. And I remember Deep Impact was, I think it was like a comet hitting the water, and then there was this massive tidal wave, and in your head you were like, that's what a tsunami looks like. It's a giant like 200-foot wave that comes and like wipes everyone out. And then when there was an actual massive tsunami, I remember like wanting to look at the videos, and it was just, what was so scary was like how the waves were rolling in, but not like in the movies, not like the 200-foot wave that comes in and wipes out the city. It was like these rolling waves that became like a flooding, and it was just like, so I even just watched one the other day that was on TV about the Boxing Day tsunami. I was like, oh, I'll watch this. Like, I don't know, what is our fascination? Is it because we're preparing ourselves for in case something happens? But like, even when you guys were going through the fires, like I was glued to everything and sobbing every night, watching everything.
I think it's shock. I think when you're not there, I guess for some people, like they just really like to see the disaster and they just want to keep like going down the rabbit hole. In other ways, it's like almost, it's so shocking because you never expect anything like that to happen to you. And especially when it's happening to people that are so close to you, you're like, how can this be happening? And it's like not natural for our brains to like understand that this is a possibility. And so you're sort of sitting there like going, how is this real? It's hard to believe it. Like, I can't really see it. Like, even for me, like seeing the photos of my house in my town felt so shocking. And then going there and seeing where my house was and the neighborhood and the devastation was like, oh yeah, like it's gone.
Did it sink in at that point?
I mean, in some ways it really sunk in as I was watching it all on fire. I feel like it was shocking, but sad. And like, I just knew the thing that kept going in my head was like, it's all gone. Like everything's gone. And seeing it all, like, it's just so catastrophic. It's like, sometimes when you see fire, you know, that's burned everything in like an area, or, you know, it's a lot of vegetation. So you see just like a lot of black. And this was like houses and houses and houses, like mountains covered in houses that are now gone. Areas where you're like, wait, that was an entire trailer park and that's gone. Like all of it, like it looks like it never existed. Like, you know, all these homes on this beautiful side of a mountain in Castellmare area, which looks very much like the Amalfi Coast in Italy. You know, it's like where the homes are sort of built into the rock. This like homes are built into the side of this mountain there. And it's just like emptiness and dark gray and sort of like little silhouettes of metal, like rounded staircases and like framing that is still there, and all of which is like very dark and hazy, and there's like palm trees still standing up in different places, and like I think the trees feel very ominous, and it's just weird. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. It's more overpowering when you see it in person, for sure, because it's so much bigger than what you can even imagine. And then but then looking at it, you're just like, I can't stop looking at it. Like, it's like watching, like driving by when a car crash has happened. You're like, why am I staring at it? It's like, it's shocking. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah. Like, you're like, oh, this is from a movie. Like, this isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just bizarre.
Well, my friend Nina, my friend Nina who does the Naja hair products and stuff, and she does my hair and everything. I love her so much. She's a beautiful soul. She wrote me a message this morning because we were talking about everything. So when I first met Nina, she was pregnant and she had just experienced a house fire. There was like an electrical issue or something like that and had a house fire. So I was writing her because I was like, it's crazy. I remember when I first met you, you had just gone through this like huge traumatic incident where there was a house fire and you lost everything. And like, I remember the community sort of coming around her and she was just like overwhelmed with gratitude. And we were all like bringing her all these things. And she wrote me this message, which is so amazing. And she said, in Lebanon, we say something in Arabic where the fire only takes our things, but it will never take our spirit and we will always rebuild. And so it's so true. And she talks about like how there's all this like magic that comes after like there's a fire. There's sort of a beauty that happens afterwards. And it's true in nature where there's all this beauty that happens, but also, I think personally, just after like going through this, you have to constantly look at the pockets of joy. Like there's so many pockets of joy that keep coming up and like being open to receiving, which is hard to do when you're not a person who's used to that. And, you kind of feel like you're being divinely guided in ways. But like that picture that I showed you guys on Instagram that we found at our house, the picture from the Curious George book. And the fact that like everything in our house was ash, even our pots and pans were melted to our cast iron, like Staub pans, like everything was melted in our whole place. Like there was nothing recognizable except for these like Staub pans. And then in the midst of all of that ash, there's this like colorful cutout picture, burned picture from Curious George of a house with like a family with kids running in a yard and animals. And it's so beautiful. And it just felt like the biggest sign. I immediately sent it to Laura Lynn Jackson and was like, oh my God,
this is the
so
one
crazy.
thing.
This is the one thing that survived.
All my friends.
Yes.
I had one friend burst into tears. One friend was like, I'm shaking. Another friend was like, I have full body chills. I was like, it is. I have chills just thinking about it.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable.
It's
that was the one thing. And there's a mom hanging out the front door. I think she's in the front door, like wearing her little like apron, and she's like yelling out to the kids or something. I was like,
yeah,
this just shows like, but the family's okay. Like the spirit's okay. Like everything's going to be okay. And it's this like perfect little house. And it looks like someone, back in the day when it was really cool to like sort of burn the edges of paper with a lighter, like back in the 90s, like for a school project, it literally looks like someone perfectly burned the edges of this one particular picture of a house. Like I showed, we have a guy who lives in our neighborhood who's a fireman, and he brought me a package by from our like fire brigade in our neighborhood. Aww. And I showed him what I found. And I was like, I wasn't there like in the stuff, like Eric found it because it's a lot. It's really dangerous, I think, to be there and be walking around all this stuff. And Eric was in full PPE and boots and mask and goggles. And anybody that's going up has to wear like full gear if you're like walking in the muck. But we like drove up, we showed the kids, and we sat in the car, and like he walked over because he remembered seeing something. So he walked over to the area
picked it up and was like, I don't know why I didn't pick this up the last time. And he showed it to me because he had been there once before us, showed it to me. And I was just like, my breath was like taken away. I was like, how is this possible? So when I showed the fireman, he was like, what? He had like full tears in his eyes. Like, it's just not possible when everything was incinerated for hours and hours and hours. It's like, that's not a worldly possibility. It's a divine possibility. It's like a 100%. Huge angelic gift to
I was picturing in my head like this like force around it, like keeping it there for you to find. Like, that's what it feels like. It's completely, it was like a sign. It really was.
I know it does. It feels like that. It feels like we were given this like little token of, you know, everything's going to be okay. Also, when Christina talked about how, this was like back in December when we recorded, right? So when Christina talked about how all of my ancestors and Eric's ancestors, if I'm remembering this correctly, were like here at this time
and around
like
you
and around us. And my dad had his hands on my shoulders and he's like holding me in my body because there's this like life moment. And I'm thinking it's like, you know, like some magical, some magical thing that's going to happen, some like surprise or like whatever. No idea that the true meaning behind that was that we were about to go through like a massive life moment. And that they were all here, which she very much sounded like that's not normal for all these ancestors on both sides to all be around us, right? And then my brain never went to, well, we're about to lose our house and our town and our schools and like everything. And so it immediately popped into my head too, where I was just like, wow, like we were being so loved on in every way and held up during such a critical time.
Yeah, I've described it as like it's been maybe for you guys, it's like it's a transformational trauma. Like it's certainly a trauma.
Yeah.
But it is transformational.
For sure.
And it's like to hear, it's so crazy. Like when something happens and then you go back and you listen to what the psychic said or what, it is unbelievable. Like, it's believable because I believe in it. But you know what? It's validating because you and I have been on this journey for a while now.
Yeah.
And we so deeply in every like cell of our being believe that this is true and
totally
this magic and this universe and source, and we're all interconnected and all just an infinite drop in the ocean of love. You know, we are so these believers in these big things. But when you go back, like for me, when I went back to the Laura Lynn Jackson episode and she was like, have you had 2 losses? And I was like, oh. And I was pregnant at the time of recording and I was so confused what she said. And like, I found out that the baby would have already passed at that time and she had picked up on that.
Yeah.
And I went back and I listened to it and I was like, what?
I know.
Like and you were saying how beautiful it was like in nature, like what happens with fires. And I remember Australia had really, really catastrophic fires, as I'm sure everyone remembers. And one of them was on Kangaroo Island. And I remember being there only maybe 6 months after it happened. And almost the entire island had been wiped out. Like so much of the island was black. And one of Bodhi's little school friends, she lost her dad and her grandpa who got caught in a car fleeing. And I remember driving around, I was like, oh, it's kind of like a wasteland when you're looking out. But then I got out of the car and I was walking through the forest and I was looking at the trees and like the new life coming from the blackened trees, these green sprouts coming out. And I started seeing it everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, I was so emotional. Like, look at this life continuing on, like breaking through the charred remains and like life grows and like continues on. I was like, oh my God, I've got chills thinking about it. It was so beautiful.
I know. It is so beautiful. And that's exactly what I think that's like the hopeful thing. That's the thing I keep thinking about is like different stages of grief, right? Like first you're in it, you're in shock, you're like walking through the steps of it. It's like step by step, day by day. And then it's like, you go from that. So it's like sadness and anger and frustration and all these things. And then you go to like, okay, action, logistics, like what are my next steps? How do I do A, B, C, D? There's some frustration in that because things can be murky and heavy and insurance is hard and things are hard. And, you know, you go through, I'm listening to stories and stories and stories of all these women who are going through this and husbands and children and everything right now. And so it's like, there's all these different stages. And then I'm at this place too, where I'm also seeing forward and like thinking about the future and the hopefulness and like thinking about, you know, looking out at my view again, or like looking out at our town again and like watching the beauty of it growing back and people coming together and like all of those things as well. So, you know, it's only been a couple weeks and it's felt like the longest couple weeks ever.
Oh my gosh. And how are you sleeping? Are you sleeping okay?
Yeah, I'm sleeping good. And the first few weeks were not easy at all. I was like waking up in the middle of the night, just like thinking about so many things. But one of the hardest days was the day I went to take the kids back to be in person at school, and their school burned down, obviously. So they're having school at the YMCA. And I walked up and I started seeing teachers and people's faces and the children. And I just like was crying and crying and crying. And still it's so hard. It's like when you go there, like you're so glad that they get to see each other and they're all like hugging and like, you know, you're looking at your kid like playing in this space and finding their friends and like their teachers. And it's beautiful and it's heartbreaking, and we're all just like figuring it out one day at a time, one step at a time, and together, which is great. But you know, it's not easy. But thankfully we have a lot of support, like from you, Tez, and you know, our friends and family, and that's been like the thing that makes, I mean, we said this before, but that's what makes Eric and I just like tear up constantly. It's just like when you receive a care package and you're like, oh my God, this is my favorite chocolate, or my socks that I wore every day, or like, you know, Doan, like the girls at Doan who are friends of mine, and they sent me a bunch of things. And like, I just, you know, when you're wearing something that's not yours for days and days from your, like, if I'm wearing like Eric's sweatshirt and I was wearing his underwear for a while, and like, we were just like trying to piece it all together. And, you know, then I put something on of theirs that, you know, I used to wear all the time, and it like really makes you feel like yourself again. And it's like so sweet and just like comforting in so many ways. So anyway, to anyone out there that's listening, thank you for all your thoughts and prayers and love. And it's going to be great. I really believe that it's going to be there's going to be a lot of beauty in all of this at some point. So
yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I'm glad we were able to do this episode. And
me too. And you guys are the best community. Thanks
ever.
Again. I know we've been banging on about it, but it's true.
It's true.
You guys are just amazing. And thank you for being patient with us.
Yes.
We actually were meant to only take 2 weeks off, but there was a miscommunication and we took 3 weeks off. So thank you for the 3 weeks. And hopefully you enjoyed those reruns. And we are excited to move forward and continue to unpack this with Sarah and the whole community. So thank you so much. Our beautiful daisies.
All right. Love you guys. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.